Hello, dear learners. Welcome to the course Introduction to Database Management System. Today we are going to discuss about traditional file approach, that is file management system, and database approach. There are many advantages of database approach. In traditional file approach, we can see there is no concept of program and data independence. But in database approach, it supports program and data independence. In traditional file approach, we can see data redundancy cannot be properly maintained. But in database management system or in database approach, data redundancy can be easily minimized by using some different techniques. Data redundancy can be easily minimized. Towards the traditional file approach, there is no concept of multiple views of data, but a database approach supports multiple views of data. And data inconsistency also cannot be properly maintained in traditional file approach. In database approach, data inconsistency can be easily maintained because in database approach, we have centralized form of data, that is metadata, which is designed as a catalog to keep the information of databases. Towards the traditional file approach, if we see data security constraints are difficult to apply. We cannot apply data security constraints. It's quite tough in traditional file approach. But in database approach, we can see data security, access constraints. These are easier to apply because already certain commands are there how to provide the access constraints. Again, we can see in traditional file approach, there is no easy recovery subsystem is not there. There is no easy recovery subsystem. But in database approach, we can find easy recovery subsystem. And this subsystem, it recovers the database or the data in case of a failure in system hardware or in transaction operation. Next, we have characteristics of database management system. We'll be discussing the main characteristics of database approach. That is, the first one is a self-description of a database. The database is self-descriptive. And number two is insulation between programs and data. That is the data abstraction. We have a program data independence. Then we have multiple views of data. Then we have data sharing and multi-user transaction processing. So those are the characteristics of database approach that we are going to discuss now. So if we talk about the first point, that is the database is self-descriptive, we can say the database system includes, in addition to the data stored, that is use of relevance to an organization, a complete definition or the description of the database structure and constraints. And this is called metadata. That is the data about data. It is stored in the so-called system catalog, which contains a description of the structure of each file, the type and the storage format of each field, and the various constraints on the data, that is the conditions that the data must satisfy. The system catalog is used not only by the users who need to know the names of tables and attributes, and sometimes data type information and other things, but also by the DBMS software, which when sometimes needs to know about how data is stored, how it is organized in order to interpret in a manner consistent with that structure. So sometimes the structure of the data cannot be hard-coded, and its programs, such as in case of typical file processing approach, but rather must be treated as a parameter in some case. If we move on to the second point, that is the insulation between programs and data, we have a program and data independence. So DBMS, it access programs because the structure of the data is described in the system catalog separately from the programs that access it. And those programs consult the catalog in order to ascertain the structure of the data, that is providing a means by which to determine boundaries between records and between fields within records. So they interpret the data properly. In other words, we can say that the BMS provides a conceptual or the logical view of the data to application programs so that the underlying implementation may be changed without the programs being modified. And this is referred to as program data independence. If we move on to the third point, that is multiple views of data, we have different users and have different views or perspective on the database. So it is of interest of the users how they require the data to be displayed or to be viewed from the database. So this is an example of a subset view. Now, a good DBMS has facilities for defining multiple views of data. This is not only convenient for the users, but also addresses security issues of data access. For example, if we say a ABC office view should not provide any means of access to, say, any financial data or any other data which is confidential to an organization. So in that case, different views can be displayed from the database. If we move on to the if we move on to the fourth point, that is the data sharing and multi-user transaction processing. Arising from this fact that the need of concurrency control, which is supposed to ensure that several users trying to update the same data, and they do so in controlled manner, so that the results of the updates are as though they were done in some sequential order rather than interleaved, which could result in data being incorrect. Now, as data sharing and multi-user transaction processing is supported in database approach, so this gives rise to the concept of a transaction, which is a process that makes one or more accesses to the database, which must have the appearance of execution in isolation from all other transactions, even the ones that access the same data at the same time, and of being atomic in the sense that if the system crashes in the middle of its complex transaction, the database contents must be as though it did not execute at all. So we can see some examples of this multi-user transaction processing, such as in airlines reservation systems, railway reservation system, banking, and this multi-user transaction processing are also known as online transaction processing applications, OLTP applications.